I raised my 5 siblings. Now my parents want another baby and I said I'd leave. I need to get this off my chest because the guilt is eating me alive, but at the same time, I feel this weird, cold sense of relief. I need to know if I'm a sociopath or if I'm just done. To understand why I said what I said, you have to understand the math of my life. My parents are good people. They aren't abusive, they aren't addicts, and they genuinely love us. But they have a philosophy that children are a blessing and the Lord will provide. The problem is, the Lord usually provides in the form of my labor. I have 5 younger siblings. We are all spaced about 2 to 3 years apart. Me, 17F. Brother, 15M, my best friend and only ally. Brother, 12M, has severe epilepsy. Sister, 9F, has about 50 different life-threatening allergies. Brother, 7M, also has epilepsy. Brother, 4M, the baby, who has developmental delays and a host of respiratory issues. Since I was about 6 or 7, my playtime was actually training. I wasn't playing with dolls, I was practicing how to support a newborn's neck. I wasn't learning to bake cookies for fun, I was learning how to make bulk pasta because that's what we could afford. By the time I was 10, I could identify the aura of an impending seizure in my brothers faster than my own dad could. I've spent my entire life as a helper girl. That's the term my mom uses. You're such a helper, honey. It sounds like a compliment, but it's actually a life sentence. The biggest resentment started when I was around 13. My brothers were all sent to the local public school. My parents wanted them to have socialization and access to the special education resources for their epilepsy. But me? I was kept home to be homeschooled. In reality, homeschooling meant I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of outdated workbooks while my mom dealt with the baby or ran errands. Half the time, the workbooks stayed closed because I was busy changing diapers, prepping nebulizer treatments for the youngest, or cleaning up vomit. I'm 17 and I'm technically behind on my credits because my school day was 10% academics and 90% domestic labor. I remember crying once, asking why I couldn't go to high school like my 15-year-old brother. My mom sat me down and held my hands. She looked so tired, dark circles under her eyes, her hair thinning from years of back-to-back pregnancies. She said, "I literally cannot do this without you. You're my right hand. If you leave for 8 hours a day, the whole house falls apart." At the time, I felt proud. I felt important. Now, I realize that was a burden no child should carry. I wasn't her right hand, I was a structural support beam for a building that was never meant to be that tall. When I was 12, my parents had the values talk with me. They explained their stance on birth control. Basically, they don't believe in it. They believe that if a child is conceived, it's meant to be. I remember looking at our cramped 3-bedroom house, the way my brothers had to sleep in triple bunks, and the way we had to qualify for free lunch programs, and I felt a pit in my stomach. Then came the pandemic. 2020 was a nightmare for everyone, but for a family of 7, at the time, in a small house, it was a pressure cooker. My dad's hours were cut. We were struggling with the mortgage. My brother's seizures were getting worse because of the stress. And that's when I found out my mom was pregnant with number 6. I didn't find out from them. I found a sonogram tucked into a drawer while I was looking for a thermometer for my sister's allergic reaction. I didn't feel happy. I felt pure, unadulterated rage. I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and cried silently into a towel so nobody would hear me. How could they? How could they look at our bank account, our cramped rooms, and their daughter who was already drowning in chores, and think, yeah, let's add one more? When the youngest was born, the helper girl role became a deputy mom role. He was a difficult baby, colicky, wouldn't sleep, and eventually diagnosed with health issues that required constant monitoring. My mom became a shell of herself. She stopped saying no to the baby because she was too exhausted to handle the tantrums. So, the 4-year-old basically runs the house, and I'm the one who has to clean up the wake of his destruction. Over the last year, something in me snapped. Maybe it was coming out as gay and realizing that my parents' traditional lifestyle was never going to be mine. Maybe it was seeing my 15-year-old brother start to get a life, going to football games, having friends over, while I was stuck inside watching Cocomelon for the 10,000th time. I started checking out. I stopped volunteering. If the sink was full of dishes, I'd walk past it. If the baby was crying, I'd wait for my mom to get him. I stayed in my room, or the corner of it that's mine, and studied for my GED like my life depended on it, because it does. The guilt is heavy. My mom looks at me with this wounded expression, like I've betrayed a sacred vow. She makes passive-aggressive comments about how things used to be so much easier when everyone pitched in. A few days ago, a close family friend was over. She's one of those people who loves the chaos of our big family but gets to leave after 2 hours. She was cooing over the 4-year-old and turned to me. "He's so precious," she said. "I bet your parents are going to want just one more to even out the numbers. Wouldn't you love another little brother or sister?" It was like a switch flipped in my brain. The years of sleepless nights, the cancelled plans, the missed school, the smell of sour milk, and the constant, crushing weight of responsibility just boiled over. "If they have another kid, I'm leaving," I said. The room went dead silent. My mom was standing right behind me with a basket of laundry. "I'm serious," I continued, my voice shaking but flat. "I'll move out the day the test comes back positive. I'll go live with my aunt, or I'll sleep on a park bench, I don't care. I am 17 years old and I've already raised 5 children. I'm not raising a 6th. I'm done being the helper girl. I want to be a person." The friend looked horrified. My mom didn't say anything. She just dropped the laundry basket, socks and tiny shirts spilling everywhere, and walked out of the room. I heard her bedroom door click shut. Since then, it's been a cold war. My dad tried to corner me in the kitchen that night. He didn't yell, my dad isn't a shouter, but his voice had that disappointed edge that hurts worse. "How could you say that to your mother?" he asked. "She's given her whole life to this family. We do this for you kids. We wanted you to have siblings so you'd never be alone. And you're threatening to abandon us over a hypothetical baby?" "It's not a threat, Dad," I told him. "It's a boundary. You and Mom choose to have these kids. I didn't. I love them, but I've done my time. I feel like I've been a 40-year-old housewife since I was 11. I'm burnt out. I have nothing left to give." He told me I was being selfish and uniquely cruel to my mother, who is already stressed. He reminded me that they provide for me, that they love me, and that family stays together through everything. My 15-year-old brother is the only one who hasn't blamed me. He came into my room later that night and sat on the floor. He just said, "I get it. If you leave, take me with you." We laughed, but it was sad. He knows that if I leave, he's next in line for the helper role, and that makes me feel like the biggest asshole on the planet. Am I the asshole? My mom is still crying in her room. My dad is giving me the silent treatment. I feel like I've shattered the illusion of the happy big family. I love my siblings. I would die for them. When my brother has a seizure, I'm the one holding his head and timing the tremors. When my sister has a hives breakout, I'm the one who knows exactly where the Benadryl is. I've been a good sister. I've been a perfect daughter. But I feel like if I don't draw this line in the sand now, I will never escape. I'll be 25, still living in this house, still changing diapers for a blessing I didn't ask for. I'm not telling them they can't have more kids. I'm just saying I won't be there to pick up the pieces if they do. They think I'm trying to control them, but I'm just trying to save myself. The thought of another pregnancy in this house makes me feel physically ill. It makes me feel like a prisoner watching her sentence get extended. Update. My parents didn't bring up the conversation directly again, but they started making comments that weren't really comments. My mom would sigh loudly when she was carrying laundry and say things like how hard it was to do everything alone now that people were too grown up to help anymore. My dad would talk about family loyalty and sacrifice while watching the news like he was delivering a lecture to the room. None of it was aimed straight at me, but it was obvious who it was meant for. I stayed out of their way and focused on finishing my GED prep. That had become my only real plan. I had no savings, no car, and barely any outside connections because I'd spent most of my life at home. But the more tense the house became, the clearer it felt that staying there long-term wasn't going to work. About a week later something happened that pushed everything forward faster than I expected. One of the few adults who had always been kind to me stopped by the house to drop something off for my mom. I'm not going to use their real name, so I'll call them Jamie. Jamie isn't related to us, but they've known my family for years. They live a few streets away and sometimes help people in town with odd jobs or rides if someone needs it. They caught me outside taking the trash cans to the curb and asked how I was doing. I guess I looked exhausted because the conversation went longer than small talk. I told them things at home had been tense and that I was trying to figure out what to do once I turned 18. Jamie listened without interrupting, which was already different from how most adults talk to teenagers. At some point they asked if I had thought about getting a job. I hadn't seriously considered it before because my parents always said the house needed me too much. Jamie said the grocery store on the edge of town had been hiring part-time workers and that they could put in a word for me if I wanted. That conversation stuck in my head all night. The next morning I walked into the kitchen while my parents were drinking coffee and told them I was going to apply for a job. The reaction was immediate. My mom looked confused first, then upset. My dad's face tightened like he had just heard bad news. They both started talking at once about how that wouldn't work with the schedule at home. My mom said the younger kids needed supervision in the afternoons. My dad said school should be my focus. The problem with that argument was obvious. They had been fine with me not going to regular school for years because I was needed around the house. Now suddenly my education mattered when I wanted to leave the house for a few hours. I told them it was part-time and that I needed money if I was going to have any independence after I turned 18. The conversation ended with my dad saying it wasn't a good idea and that we would revisit it later. I applied anyway. Jamie helped me fill out the online application, and a week later the store called me in for an interview. I walked there by myself because it wasn't far, and the manager offered me a position stocking shelves in the evenings. It wasn't glamorous work. It paid minimum wage. But when they handed me the schedule and said I'd start the following Monday, it felt like someone had opened a window in a room that had been closed for years. My parents were furious when they found out. They didn't forbid it outright, but the disapproval was obvious. My mom said the younger kids would notice I was gone and wonder why I didn't want to spend time with them. My dad warned me that a job would distract me from family responsibilities. I started working anyway. Those first few weeks were strange. I had never had coworkers before. I had never been paid for anything I did. Most of the other employees were teenagers from the local high school, and they talked about things I barely understood: sports events, teachers, weekend plans. At first I felt like an alien dropped into another planet. But it also felt normal in a way my life rarely did. The money wasn't much, but I started saving every dollar I could. Around the same time, the situation at home kept getting worse. My parents weren't yelling or punishing me. Instead they leaned into guilt. My mom acted hurt whenever I left for work. My dad would make comments about how families used to stick together before people got selfish ideas. It was exhausting. Jamie noticed the change almost immediately. I had started stopping by their place after work sometimes just to sit somewhere quiet for an hour before going home. Their house felt calm. No screaming toddlers, no constant noise, no laundry machine running at midnight. Eventually Jamie said something I hadn't expected. They told me if things got really bad at home, I could stay there temporarily. The offer wasn't dramatic. It was said in a normal tone, like someone offering a spare chair at the table. But it changed everything. I didn't move out immediately. I stayed at home another month after that conversation. Then one evening my dad told me I needed to quit my job because the house was falling behind. My mom had been struggling to keep up with the younger kids, and he said my priorities were wrong. That argument lasted almost an hour. It ended with my dad saying if I was going to live under his roof I had to start acting like part of the family again. I packed a backpack that night. I didn't make a big scene. I didn't slam doors or announce anything to the younger kids. I just waited until the house was quiet and walked down the street to Jamie's place. They were surprised to see me standing there with a bag, but they let me in. The next morning my parents realized I wasn't home. The reaction from them was immediate and extreme. Instead of calling me first or asking around quietly, they jumped straight to the worst possible conclusion. They decided Jamie had manipulated me into leaving. By that afternoon they were telling people in town that I had been taken advantage of. By evening they had contacted the police and reported that Jamie had kidnapped their 15-year-old daughter. I found out about it from Jamie's neighbor. 2 officers showed up at Jamie's house that same night. The problem for my parents was simple: I wasn't there when the police arrived. I had gone to work. Jamie told the officers exactly what had happened. They said I had come to their house on my own and that I had been free to leave whenever I wanted. Since I wasn't present, the officers told them they would need to speak with me directly before making any conclusions. They left after a short conversation. My parents apparently assumed that would solve the situation in their favor. A few days later the officers came back. This time I was home. Jamie answered the door and called me into the living room when the officers asked if I was there. The conversation that followed was uncomfortable but surprisingly calm. The officers asked my age first. When I told them I was 17, they both looked at each other. My parents had apparently reported me as 15. Then they asked if I was staying there voluntarily. I told them yes. They asked if anyone had forced me to leave my house or prevented me from going back. Again, the answer was no. The officers took notes while I explained the situation at home. I didn't exaggerate anything. I described the years of childcare, the homeschooling situation, and the pressure that had been building for a long time. Jamie stayed quiet the entire time. At one point one of the officers asked if I felt safe returning home if I wanted to. I said I didn't want to go back. That seemed to settle something in their minds. They explained that since I was 17 and there was no evidence of coercion, the situation didn't meet the definition of kidnapping. They also explained that filing a false report could cause problems for the people who made it. Before they left, one of the officers said they were required to submit a report to Child Protective Services based on what I had described. I didn't realize what that meant at the time. My parents did. Within a week the entire town seemed to know something was going on. Our town is small. News travels faster than anyone expects. A CPS worker showed up at my parents' house. Then they spoke with neighbors. Then they contacted my siblings' school. Suddenly the situation had flipped in a way my parents hadn't anticipated. Instead of people seeing them as worried parents trying to rescue their daughter, they started looking like people who had lied to the police. The grocery store manager asked me privately if everything was okay at home. A couple of my coworkers mentioned hearing rumors about an investigation. My parents called me multiple times during that week. The first call was angry. My dad demanded I come home immediately and accused Jamie of manipulating me. The second call was more frantic. My mom said CPS was asking questions about our household and that I needed to explain things properly. I told them I had already told the truth. After that the call stopped for a while. The drama didn't end there. CPS scheduled interviews with several people, including me. They wanted to know about the homeschooling situation, the childcare responsibilities, and the health conditions of my siblings. None of it was comfortable to talk about, but it also wasn't a secret anymore. Meanwhile, Jamie started getting strange looks from some people in town who had only heard my parents' version of the story. A few neighbors believed the kidnapping rumor even after the police cleared it up. Then the second wave of information started spreading. Someone mentioned the false police report. Someone else mentioned the CPS visit. The narrative shifted again. My parents suddenly found themselves being asked questions they weren't prepared for. Teachers at the school wanted to know why one child had been kept home for years while the others attended classes. A social worker asked how childcare responsibilities were divided in the household. For the first time in my life, adults were asking my parents the same kinds of questions they had always asked me. I kept working during all of this. Jamie let me stay in the spare room while things settled down. I helped with groceries and cleaning to contribute where I could. It wasn't perfect, but it was stable. A few weeks later CPS contacted me again to confirm some details about my living situation. They said the case regarding my parents was still open and that they would be following up with the family. By then the situation in town had turned into something resembling a quiet scandal. People were talking about how my parents had tried to accuse someone of kidnapping their own daughter. Others were discussing the homeschooling arrangement and the number of responsibilities placed on the oldest child. My parents had always been respected in the community. Suddenly that reputation wasn't as solid as it used to be. I heard from my brother during that time. He called one evening and told me things at home were chaotic. My parents were stressed about the investigation and angry about the rumors. My siblings were confused about why social workers were visiting the house. He didn't blame me for leaving. He just said the house felt different now. Months have passed since then. I'm still 17. I'm still working at the grocery store. I'm still saving money while finishing my GED studies. The situation with my parents isn't resolved yet. CPS hasn't closed the case, and the tension between everyone involved hasn't disappeared. But the biggest difference is that the illusion of our perfect big family finally cracked. Once that happened, everything else followed.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update for more such stories.